Hello everyone, welcome to this. This is our fourth webinar in a series of webinars we're hosting as part of our annual user community symposium. Just a quick note to say that we are recording the webinar. I'm very happy to be joined by Dom Moorhouse, CEO of MethodGrid, Bruce Applin, Global Distribution Director at MGI Learning, and Rachel, our Head of Customer Success. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hi everybody.
Before I hand you over to Dom, Bruce and Rachel, I'm just going to go through a few updates here. So, like I said, this is a series of webinars. We ran two yesterday. Oxford Brookes University talking about how they use MethodGrid to assure complex projects there. Rachel and I ran through a webinar showing you the features we've released throughout 2021. Both of those are now available to watch on demand on recordings on our website. And then at 2 o'clock today, Future Shift did an interesting webinar about how they're using MethodGrid to deliver platform-led consulting. We're here now on MGI Learning. Tomorrow we have Step 5 group talking about how they're rolling out MethodGrid for large-scale transformational projects. Then myself looking at our 2022 product roadmap. We then have a guest webinar from EcoSulis at 2 p.m. on Thursday. They're rewilding specialists talking about rewilding in large-scale construction engineering projects. And then finally, we have Dom again, 4 p.m. on Thursday, talking about the future of project assurance in terms of machine learning and AI. So if you want to sign up to any of those or watch them on demand, you can do so at methodgrid.com/webinars. There'll be a Q&A at the end of this session. We've already posted up a few questions that we had in advance for Bruce. But if you do want to put your own questions in there, I'm just going to post the link up here into the chat. So in the Teams chat now, there's a link. If you go there, it's dead easy. You'll see a little field at the top. Just put in any questions you'd like to ask, and we'll get to them at the end. OK, I'll hand over to Dom and Bruce.
Great, thanks, Jody. And actually, before I introduce myself, I'm going to say again another warm welcome to Bruce, who's director at MGI Learning. And Rachel and I have had the privilege of working very closely with Bruce and his team over the last couple of months, I guess. And because it was so kind of current, we thought this would be a great, client case study to sort of bring in, because the implementation journey is very, very fresh in mind. In fact, it hasn't even fully completed yet. So, Bruce, over to you, sir. I'd ask if you could just give a little bit of an introduction, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So Bruce Applin from MGI Learning. We set up the business in 2003, and what MGI is all about is really helping organisations and people within that organisation to build stronger relationships, both with colleagues, with suppliers, and clearly, very importantly, with clients and customers. And we do that using the MGI Learning Toolkit, which we've created. Our founder, Mary Gober, created it over a number of years, and we've continued to develop that. And we work very much in the field of customer satisfaction and employee engagement, in helping teams really bond with the organisation and deliver a great service. Some of the factors we talk about are really about a balancing of that relationship and the communication style that you may use. So recognising that within excellent communications, you have a good people balance and technical balance. So a good people side and technical side. And of course, technical roles very much around about how you might utilise technology within the organisation, particular skill sets if you're in a particular trade, all of those technical things in terms of what you do. And then from the people side, which is where we focus on, is recognising that how you can communicate what mindset you need to be in, what's the optimal mindset for delivering a great service and having a great longevity of a relationship with somebody else, and how you communicate with them. And we look at that on the people side and making sure there's a real nice balance between the people and technical side of things. So we work with organisations through providing training, both online and face-to-face, and certainly over the last couple of years, heavily through Teams and Zoom, to really engage with those organisations to help them support them in delivering great services to their colleagues and customers. So that's what we're very much about.
Great, thanks, Bruce. And you may have stolen some thunder from your MGI learning overview slide as well, but we'll try and get a bit more out of from you about MGI Learning in a moment as well. And just myself, Dom Moorhouse. So I'm one of 4 co-founders actually of MethodGrid and the CEO for my sins. Yeah, I think we'll leave that pithy summary. But what we're going to cover today is a number of aspects. We're going to try and get a little bit more from Bruce as to the background to MGI Learning and why in their instance kind of they commissioned MethodGrid in the first place, what sort of challenge it was seeking to address. Clearly the main effort for today is to talk about the implementation journey that we take our clients on, and we're looking at it specifically from the perspective of a professional license. And a professional license for us is a sort of an SME user, which we characterize at somewhere between 25 and 50 staff. So there is a much larger sort of implementation experience we undergo for our enterprise clients, but we'll sort of bring that to life as we go. And then once we've sort of covered the kind of core approach, we're going to open up a bit of a fireside chat with Bruce to talk about that experience and gain some insights and I guess top tips from Bruce as to how he's found it and what he'd recommend to others that are embarking on the same journey. Bruce, I don't know if there was anything additional about MGI Learning. You gave a fulsome intro earlier, yes. But yeah,
I did. I might have overcooked the intro, but certainly the organisations we work with. We have the luxury of working with organisations, fabulous organisations, who are in many industries. So be they financial institutions, so both banking and also insurance companies, to travel. So we work with a number of airlines and travel and tourism type organisations. A big sector for us is social housing. So where the roles of those types of organisations in providing real high quality homes in the social aspects across the country is so important, and actually backing up the service that they provide with their people service is so important. So we work with that type of organisation as well, as I said, banking, I mentioned airlines, and certainly with retail as well. So we've been working with retail for many years. So we're very grateful to have the opportunity to working with some fabulous organisations in many fields in terms of the industries they work in. And as I said, we deliver online, we deliver face-to-face or through technology solutions such as Zoom and Teams. And what we've been involved and evolving over many years is recognising what we can add in terms of value, not only with the toolkit and providing that knowledge base of the toolkit right up front to all the people within an organisation, but also how we can then support that organisation moving forward and utilising, adopting and applying that knowledge and that set of tools. So actually it really embeds, it becomes part of their DNA within the organisation. So that's really paramount. And that's one of the reasons why we started to look at systems such as MethodGrid to see how we can support organisations and for us to become very efficient in being able to do that, provide excellent service for our customers.
Great, thanks, Bruce. That's probably the perfect segue actually into this aspect here, which is if you could try and give the listeners, viewers, a sense of why you felt why you were looking for a system like this in the first place. What was the sort of the trigger point?
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Yeah, happy to do that. And so I guess where we had mentioned earlier, we had very much focused around delivery and the operational side of things. And what we wanted to do is broaden that relationship to ensure that not only were we providing that upfront solution in terms of the knowledge and transfer of knowledge through the training that we did with organisations, but to ensure that we really helped and support the organisation through embedding. So within our organisation, we've set up an overview of what we call plan on a page. This gives us a very simple formula in terms of how we can adopt and work with organisations. I mean, it's simply as A plus B equals C, where A is about that learning knowledge, that transfer of knowledge in that training environment, be that digital or face-to-face or Zoom or Teams. And then through B, so A plus B, and B is really focused around what we can then do and what the organisation receiving the training can then do with that content and how they actually apply that and embed it. So it's creating a believable case. So there's a real understanding, there's a real clarity why people are investing time into learning this particular toolkit, and then moving forward with other embedding activities to make sure it really resonates within the organisation at all levels. Is engaging for all people, including the key influencers and managers, and it really integrates within the DNA and procedures and processes within the organisation and HR policies. So there's a real strong reward and recognition for using the tools and those sorts of things. And so what we were finding is, from a point of view of managing our relationships with our customers, when we were setting up projects, those projects could potentially take from start to finish maybe 9 months to a year, to incorporate all the embedding pieces and the size and complexity of that particular rollout. We had been using a tried and tested method of just use lots and lots of spreadsheets, and then looking at other systems to really try and consolidate that down. And what we found in MethodGrid was a real blending of some of the key aspects that we needed to have in terms of supporting the management of our projects. And so what that brought together for us was not only the ability to track our activities to keep us on track and keep us in line with what we needed to deliver with the customer. We're also able to link that through to a knowledge pool of data to help us understand these particular steps that within the process that we're doing, and making sure that we understood them and then applied them. The regular ones, yeah, there's certainly things that just we know how we're doing, but sometimes there are some really quite complex and unique steps within some of our processes and procedures that we needed to apply. And so actually this gave us the ability to look at reference material and say, so why are we doing this? Okay, yeah, we can really understand it and then really create the value for the customer. And what we also liked from the MethodGrid side of things was that it's something you could potentially share with the client. So actually, as you go through and really collaborate and walk hand in hand through the whole process, that you can actually share the MethodGrid tools and the MethodGrid itself, so that the customer can actually look at the particular steps in the project plan, and you can pick and choose which ones you might want to look at, and really help support that whole collaborative process in terms of delivery of the project. Part of the other catalyst for us in terms of why was it a good time to do this and why we were looking is that we also set up a new part of the business on the project management side of things and had some new people. So we were starting to look at our processes and evaluating those and developing new ones. And so it was a great time for us to, whilst we're doing that, to actually apply that and load that onto a system that will keep us on track. So that was the reasons why we started looking and found MethodGrid, thankfully.
No, great, thanks, Bruce. I think it was perfect. Perfect situation with respect to some of those multiple needs. The bringing together, I guess, of multiple sort of resources. I mean, MGI Learning have got some fantastic tools and resources, but I think it was fair to say spread across a sort of increasingly difficult estate to bring together. I think the demonstration of that expertise was a key aspect to win work. And then the assurance aspect, Bruce has mentioned that, I guess, was key as well. And we were just chatting actually before we went live today. I think currently circa 60 live sort of client engagements and growing. So certainly outgrowing probably the spreadsheet approach to assurance as well. Great stuff. No, thank you. So hopefully that's kind of situated, who MGI Learning are and what their sort of trigger point was. So now we're going to just talk about what the implementation journey looks like. And again, to sort of put the context here that we are talking about implementation for, as I said, a professional license. So typically an organization somewhere between 25 and 50, sort of users, which for us is broadly a sort of a 6 to 8 weeks exercise elapsed time. But within what would typically be a longer journey for the end client. And, what we always advise our clients is that, essentially what they're undertaking when they implement a technology like MethodGrid is it's a capability uplift journey. It's not about just, simply putting a bit of technology in, turning on the go button and expecting the world to change. It's looking at this journey through a much more multi-dimensional, change kind of lens. And what, we recommend therefore is that, that typically is a very deliberate project. It would range typically between 6 to no longer than 12 months. Anything shorter than that, you tend to find organizations that haven't fully understood all of the dimensions they need to bring together. And anything longer than that, there is a sort of risk that energy sort of levels just dissipate somewhat. So 6 to 12 months tends to be the perfect frame. Our dedicated implementation journey that we're going to bring to life now is for the first 2 months, and from us organizationally, it's delivered by our professional services team. At the end of that 2 months, it's not like we disappear. We just hand over to our what we call customer success team, and we've got the head of the customer success in Rachel on the webinar today. And then Rachel sort of makes sure that we've got regular touch points thereafter. So as I say, what we're going to describe now is the dedicated first chunk of this journey, and then it hands over to our customer success team. So what does it ordinarily look like? Well, as I said, broadly speaking, it's a sort of 6 to 8 week exercise. We're flexible because, of course, every client is unique, and of course we're always trying to coordinate sort of diaries and so forth. So rule of thumb, it's sort of 6 to 8 weeks. It can sort of go on sometimes just a little bit longer. Week one, what we really focus on is a very dedicated kind of kickoff event, and we have and typically this is a whole day event. We love doing it at client offices where we can. There's nothing better about getting to work together in a sort of face-to-face environment. Of course, over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of this remotely, and indeed, I think with the MGI Learning team, Bruce, actually pretty quite a dispersed team across the UK. So in this instance, it did make much more sense to be remote. Notwithstanding, quite a full day, and what we're looking to cover is all of the aspects that need to be holistically considered and designed into that project. And effectively, the output of the day feeds the project brief and the sort of scoping of the collaboration thereafter. So we look at it through multiple lenses, really. I mean, lens one is the project management dimension. Who's going to be working on the project from both sides? What's the indicative high level sort of time frame? And how do we sort of see the sort of overall staging of that? Bruce can talk later about how the MGI Learning have chunked up their sort of implementation into sort of piloting and sort of go live phases as well. We'll come on to later. We look at clearly how the user training is going to work. We very much talk about training up a cohort of super users, and then that cohort taking on the responsibility thereafter to train. We'll come back to that in a moment, but how that we start talking about how that will work. We look at the sort of the critical aspect from the stakeholders and the change management piece. Who are the key influencers in the business, both from a positive advocate perspective and also a detractor perspective, and how do we sort of clearly get everybody on board and use the advocates to really sort of get the right messaging out there. On which note, we talk about what kind of drumbeat and communications the project's going to work to, both from an internal project team perspective, but also how we kind of get the message out to the wider team. We spend a lot of time actually talking about sort of the knowledge dimension, in terms of what knowledge we need to build out initially, but also once we've been successful in that, how this lives ever after, how it kind of essentially embeds into BAU, what kind of governance structure is going to be put onto the ongoing maintenance of the intellectual property that's being built. We also talk about the sort of HR strategy that needs to be wrapped around this. How do you reward members of the firm and team, the wider team, for being part of the ongoing IP development? Conversely, how do you set the compliance levels right? So if people are just, completely ignoring it, what's the implication of that? So we talk about how this sinks into HR strategy, and also the quality management systems of an organization, which are, really key determinants of, bedding it down into business as usual. And then finally, we look at technical integrations, what aspects we need to sort of work with our technical colleagues to get involved in those down the line as well, make sure they're all set up properly. So as I say, a really kind of rich day, and the output is, the nominated project manager is able to sort of put together a very coherent project brief that scopes it all out. And the final point I would say, I'll hand over to Bruce in a moment, actually get a reflection on the kickoff day. But it's a really key bit that for this to be successful, the recipient client really does have to own and project manage the implementation. Any external, regardless of their talents, aren't going to be the best agents for that implementation ultimately. So effectively, our position as MetaGrid is to make sure we are hugely supportive and collaborative of the nominated project manager and the wider team, and making sure they've got all the materials ready to kick the project off. But Bruce, I don't know, any reflections on just that kickoff day?
Yeah, it was very instructive. It was very informative. The thing that really resonated with us is that there was so much synergy between how we might be liaising, working with our customers in implementing our toolkit, our learning toolkit with organisations, in the way that you then worked with us. And we actually took some key points from the way you worked with us in terms of how we can change things moving with our customers. So there was very good synergy in that, and that felt very comfortable. It also felt after that first week that we actually had, the first week or even the first day, that we had some real knowledge in terms of how we can start building and start moving forward. So even before the training started to take shape and actually having some, we were able to get access, have a play. It's a pretty intuitive system, so we were able to start do a bit of a discovery ourselves and learn from that. It was great to be able to be very clear on what our particular project outline was. So what we discussed on that initial call was very much around an approach to say, let's build a master grid that we can then develop and then clone and use for actual application. But we were realistic on the timescales. We were realistic on the impact this might have in terms of the effort we'd need to apply for this and the diligence for this against running business as usual. So we needed to be very realistic, and what I found Dom and the team to be very flexible in terms of making that fit for us in our sort of structure and our plan, to the point where we could then start to come into a beta phase. So once we completed this initial setup phase, then we could start looking at betaing it with some of our key customers, so maybe one or two selected clients, and developing it from there. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Bruce. And actually, that point that Bruce made there about the, I think it's fair to say there's a little bit of a sort of an aha moment actually for a lot of the team, and we find this quite commonly actually, because you won't be surprised to know that we take our own medicine and heavy users of MetaGrid ourselves. So we've got our own implementation methodology for guiding the implementation journey, and I think Bruce, what you're reflecting on there is, you could see essentially how we were applying it to our service delivery, clearly in complete parallel as to how you were taking out MGI services to your end clients. And I think it sort of really comes alive, doesn't it, in that first event?
Absolutely.
So great stuff. That's week one, really, is to get the sort of project kicked off. I think essentially what we do then in the background straight thereafter is, armed with all the information, particularly around the technical integrations, is some of the sort of fairly basic sort of technological setup. So getting the initial team onboarded. We'll do a bit about branding. Obviously, we'll take a kind of company's brand palette and make sure we reflect that in the color palette of the accounts. We set up anything that's kind of been asked for in terms of notification settings, et cetera, et cetera. We also, there's the ability to set up sort of specific subdomains. I don't think in this instance we did, but sometimes we're setting up say specific domains And then finally looking at sort of standard integrations. So for example, integrations into an Office 365 Teams environment, or an integration into a Google Suite environment, or integration with Slack collaboration tool. And I think actually in this instance we've MGI Learning are users of Slack, so we've started exploring that as well. So yeah, technically sort of get the account sort of set up, which moves us to the sort of next kind of I guess, which is a really key component for getting the initial grids built. Based on the conversation we had at the kickoff, we locked down on what are the key 1 or 2 grids which will really add biggest bang for buck in terms of value. And in collaborative building, everybody gets the corollary benefit of sort of early use of the platform, and can see it coming to life. I'm going to ask Bruce actually now to take over the screen and sort of share the grid, the sort of service they chose and how they went about building it. But yeah, just to say, as I hand over to Bruce, this is a really, really key component of the journey, is getting the first IP built, collaboratively. But Bruce, over to you. Maybe you can just bring your specific example to life a little. Certainly, Dom. Thank you. Let me share the screen. So hopefully everyone can see what you might recognise as a grid. So this is our standard implementation master grid. So this is the platform or the first steps that we started to build those particular elements, those steps into the process. And so we'd been working together on constructing or reviewing our particular process. So it's actually in creating this grid, it was quite cathartic in terms of identifying our process, and actually as we building it onto this particular platform. And it certainly gave us some challenges and food for thought in terms of questioning why we're doing these things, or what should be happening here, that we're clearly missing some things. So it was a great tool to just keep us on track for those. But what we've decided to use, and there are many ways that you can use Method Grid, but for us, what worked well is by structuring different stages of a project. So we can see stage 1 here, which is sort of our initial kickoff, which is where our commercial teams would hand over to the project management team. So from a sale to actually transferring that into starting to do the implementation. And so it's really tracking to make sure that we have a very robust process for that. We have some documentation that is transferred to us, and we call that a customer information document, so CID. And then we also have an internal kickoff meeting. So if I'm going to open one of these elements here, what the structure of the elements and what we tended to choose from would be things like defining who the responsibility and ownership sits for this particular element, what the purpose was, and also the key principles. And then it gave us the ability to create a set of checklists and key tasks. So again, it's just keeping us on track. So we were very clear on who needs to do what and by when. We could also link any other elements. So there are some more detailed stages that form part of this particular element, and we decided to actually extract that and create that as a separate element completely. So one of our aspects is when we're structuring the project team internally and deciding who's going to be the key players in managing the implementation with a client, is that we work with the OD team, which is our organisation team, in terms of finding out who's going to be part of the team. There's a set series of processes and steps we need to do, engaging those associate consultants. So we have that mapped out, and it just gives us the ability to link those elements. So if I was to then say, okay, well, we're going to now go and complete the particular session, I can just select that and it will take me straight to the OD engaged elements, which again has that responsibility, gives some really clear purpose and key principles in terms of what we need to do. Gives us our steps, any templates. What's really nice as well is for the team to be able to say, well, actually, there are maybe experts, subject matter experts within the organisation on a particular element. So there's actually a nice escalation path to say, I need a bit of help in understanding a little bit something. Then they can go to that particular person, and this tool allows us to identify who those people are. And also it gives us some hints and tips.
So just food for thought when we're actually setting through and working through that engagement. So what we started to do was really map out those particular steps, so all the stages of the project. So stage one is our internal kickoff. Then we have our client kickoff, so that's where we're starting to engage with the customer and creating the project team with them. Then start going through the planning stage through to the diagnostics. So we work with organisations. And part of that process is to gauge the diagnostic information, so find out where they're at right now, what type of language they use, what relationships they have with their customers, what their measures are in terms of, is that a net promoter score, and those sorts of things. And we can come up with a diagnostic tool and scope, and then we can provide the solution in terms of how we can actually meet their objectives and their goals. And I was talking about the A plus B. Well, the A plus B always drives C, and C is about the business metrics and the goals that they're looking to achieve, which may be regulatory, they could be customer engagement or client employee engagement, could be financial. It's whatever the metrics they are, the return on investment they're looking for. We have a section on product design. So many of our customers, we're able to provide a very good product which we can tailor to their particular needs, and in some cases we actually really do design a very start at a very low starting point, and actually building in from knowledge that we have to create something that's very unique and bespoke for customers. So we have a product team that help and support that. So again, there are a series of activities and elements that they would apply for any particular project. And as we move forward, we've got our launch. So this is about where we launch the comms side of things into the organisation, so they're aware of what the organisation is going to receive and what it's aiming to achieve. And then we also then have the delivery stage. This is where we're physically now delivering those particular elements. We then go on to our embedding stage, and also then at the end of the project, review and assess. So that's where we're working with both internally and also externally with our customer base to really identify how the project has run. Has it been successful? Has it achieved the goals? And again, this period of time from stage 1 through to stage 9 could be any time from between 6 months to maybe a year or even longer. So we have very good long ongoing relationships of longevity with our customers. So I just wanted to go back to you and maybe pick up some of the other features that we found really incredibly useful within MethodGrid. So in terms of the client kickoff stages, we have a number of different elements. What was fabulous is, and you'll see this little grey element here, is that something that Dom really gave us some real good guidance on in terms of a client balanced scorecard. And so what that was really about recognising that setting a scorecard for the success of the project, and not necessarily that being run by the PM or the project manager, but actually having somebody that was outside of the direct management of that particular project to be able to act as an adjudicator and a measurer of success for the actual client. So that's something that we're developing now, and that was strong guidance and good guidance we got from Dom. But for example, our customer kickoff process, again, you'll find it very familiar in terms of we can define the responsibility purpose, we can put hints and tips and actually add reference material. And the way that we've structured this technology-wise is that all these files are linked through our SharePoint system. So everything is at a single point. So whenever they're updated at the central point, but MethodGrid then links through to all of those. So we know through MethodGrid that it's always the most up-to-date most up-to-date documentation and templates that we are using. It gives us our checklists, our key principles. Again, we've got some other linkage and other templates there and more hints and tips. But one of the things we really liked, and I won't play this too long because it is me, and it's never good to see yourself on TV. But we recalled some videos. So this just gives an explainer video about what the client kickoff meeting is all about. So any of my PMs or any of the teams that are looking at this can actually just get a refresher on exactly the things we need to step through, and literally can just play that and watch the video. So, but a really useful tool and actually quite fun just making it as well.
Yeah, no, it's great use. video. Thanks, Bruce. I think, what everybody can see there, it's a fantastic, I mean, I know this, will be work in progress forever and a day, because it's constantly now sort of been, building out, and new knowledge is being accreted into it. But, I'm sure everybody can see from that, the really rich example of an end-to-end service delivery methodology for, in this instance, MGI Learning's expertise, designing, delivering and embedding, very, very, high-end sort of training, evolutions programs. So hopefully that's really brought it to life. And also just to say about the process. So, again, this was a very, this was, it was essentially we kicked it off with 1 day remote. Again, it was remote, but it's an incredibly rich conversation that's sort of involved in collaboratively building this. And actually, there's value in and of itself in that conversation, because Bruce and a number of his colleagues, it was a great way of sort of testing and adjusting people's understanding of what the interfaces were and what different steps actually were in the journey. And a lot of clarifications going on just to sort of build this kind of first grid. And that's really, really valuable conversation. I think also to say then what happened there after that first day is we went more into a kind of a review kind of mode. So Bruce and his colleagues were then allocated a number of these to go off and sort of develop, and then we used a bit of a colour scheme to sort of work our way through a draft and a sign-off process. And then Rachel and myself in this instance were coming back just to sort of check in with client colleagues, just to sort of keep that build out plan on track. So yeah, thanks, Bruce. I'll grab the screen back at this point.
Just while you're doing that, Dom, I mean, and I've given you this feedback and the team's feedback before. What we found really worked well was you gave us the space and the time to be able to element a self-discovery, knowing that you guys were at the end of a Teams call or a Zoom call or telephone call as well, to get us out into, if we got into a technical issue and thought not quite sure how to do this or what the functionality was capable of, then you guys were there to be able to help that. And it was a nice balance between giving us the space and the time to do that, but at the same time being a bit of a coaching Jiminy Cricket on our shoulder sort of thing, and just making sure that we were keeping on track and we were keeping it. Otherwise, it could just, you could end up saying, well, business as usual is now taking priority and we're not able to do these things, and it starts to sort of reduce in terms of its importance. And that clearly wasn't the case here, and you were able to keep us on track. So we're grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we're good at that. Keeping people on track is. Yeah, no, thank you, Bruce. So, and I'm slightly conscious of time, so also maybe speed up just so we can get to a bit of Q&A. And I think Jodie, you can keep us honest. We've got until the hour, haven't we? If we need to be. But this is really rich stuff. So I'm also not seeking to speed up too much. So yeah, the content mapping is a really key component of the journey. And if I'm honest, we have a little debate about the right chronology of this next bit. As it worked out with Bruce and colleagues, we did a bit of the training probably after we did the content mapping. If I'm honest, we're actually going through a bit of a shift internally, and we tend to do sort of now a bit up front and a bit after the content mapping. So, please don't sort of see these kind of steps as kind of absolutely linear. There's always a bit of a discussion we have with our clients. And as I say, probably as a sort of an average point, we're starting to move towards super user training before content mapping, and then we finish off post mapping, because clearly getting a little bit of this done left of the actual mapping is helpful for for the team. But I'll get a little bit of input from Rachel and Bruce at this point. But just to say, as a summary, again, the philosophy is to take a cohort of in an SME example, probably 6 to 10, get them really qualified up to super user level training, so they have the confidence and the technical nous to then roll it out to the wider team. And of course, beyond the implementation project, have got the ability to embed new joiners in the future. It is is by some margin the most effective way of continuing that sort of that knowledge dispersion. So Rachel and Bruce, over to you if you want to give maybe a little bit about how this actually worked and what the approach is.
Yeah, sure. So for MGI specifically, we actually split the training out into 3 separate modules. And it was a really, really great experience for me to learn how the process works, because this was my first implementation actually with Method Grid. So it was a really, really good time for me to have lessons learned. And as Dom mentioned, actually we have restructured the implementation plan now based on that, just so that we do have a little bit of training up front, because actually we discovered that having those 3 sessions after the content build, Bruce and his team were already pretty much experts. So of course there were things that I was training them on as we went, but actually, yeah, we saw a lot of value in moving that up. It's an absolute pleasure to see you using the system now, the way you've been doing on this session, Bruce. It's really, really wonderful to see. I feel like you're just flying through it. It's really great.
Yeah, thanks,
Bruce. From your side, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks, Dom. Yes, so I agree. I think what worked really well was actually breaking down that training into different modular approaches, because we were then able to go through and start to progress with the grid and all the elements, and actually we were able to then understand what it is we were really what was really capable of the system. And then to start challenging or asking questions and learning more at a slightly more detailed level, because we understood the basics right up front, having not only learned through a couple of hours and then tried it and got slightly comfortable with it. I don't think we're expert, but bless you for saying that, Rachel. But certainly just getting that comfort level to then be able to say, okay, so now let's see what we can do here. And what we're able to achieve and what differences we might want to make. So that was a really nice evolutionary type of training with blended real practice in real life scenarios, and that's that worked really well for us.
No, great. And again, it's sort of, we're fully flexible, and every instance of this is slightly different. Whether that's on site or off, remote, and whether it's one day or whether it's modular. Again, no two really look the same, albeit, again, back to that summary point, we are definitely moving to a, recommended approach of at least 2 parts, before and after the content build, which brings us then to the sort of the end of the dedicated, I guess, professional services component of this, which is then the handover from the professional services team to essentially Rachel's team. And actually for Bruce and colleagues, we're actually at this juncture now, so this really is kind of a live case study. In fact, we're scheduled to sort of have this session potentially even at the end of this week. But what that's effectively doing is essentially formally closing out the dedicated implementation bit and handing over to customer success, recognizing, as I mentioned before, that the MGI's kind of change project, will continue for some time yet. And what we're looking to make sure here is in place is that, whether we've any final support to Bruce and the team around, project communications, if there's any sort of residual training still required, and just to make sure that the super user cohort are equipped and ready for, the wider rollout. Of course, helping onboard the additional colleagues now as they come on and as they're trained. And then we also just do the final check into, some of the BAU aspects. Have we addressed who's going to be looking after the content going forward? What are the kind of future kind of content development gates going to be? So it's not with all that great work of building it doesn't just atrophy or, even worse, turn into the Wild West and everybody overwriting it. So making sure that aspect is in place, making sure again that, it's embedded into the culture and the HR kind of rewards system of MGI Learning, potentially even part of their, their sort of performance kind of review, discipline down the line. So, people are being recognized and rewarded for contributing to content. And then linking it to the QMS aspects. And, Bruce referenced that, the balanced scorecard idea is a fantastic way of, putting in place actually a very, very robust quality management system. We check all of our, we ask all of our end clients what objectives they want to achieve. We measure those independent of the delivery team. And on a regular basis, say quarterly, we check those results. With Grid's new, with Bruce's Grid now, that is methodologically built in. So there's the great platform for a quality management sort of system discipline, that sits above it as well. So yeah, we make sure all those aspects have been sort of, finally considered, and then it's a handover to Rachel's team, and we set up the cadence for those regular checkpoints, thereafter. And Bruce, you can't really comment on this, I guess, because we haven't undertaken that step yet. But hopefully that gives a flavour of what we will be covering very, very imminently with you. Yeah. So I think hopefully that gives a good sweep through the sort of, as I said, the implementation journey for a professional license. We've got, and this is essentially that, what then is taking place thereafter is Rachel's team, with these regular calls. And if any additional support is needed, clearly, we're on call to help with any additional grid content build. Rachel's always there, and her colleagues for technical kind of refresh, as it were. And Jody and his team are there for any sort of ongoing API sort of integration efforts as well. So yeah, hopefully that gives a sweep of what is covered on a typical journey. We've got 15 minutes or so to cover off some other high-level questions. I'll have a quick look at the Slido panel to see if people have upvoted any, but if not, we'll just we'll tackle as many as we can in the residual time. And maybe Bruce, just to get us going, I'll have a look to see if any have been upvoted. But we'll kick off with question 1. Which is, from your experience, was there just a right time to undertake this project? You did, I guess you touched on some of this, but
yeah, touched on it earlier. That's you're absolutely right, Dom. We had a slightly perfect storm in the fact that we were having a different approach in the way that we were going to be managing projects. So in terms of really supporting organisations from the project management team in terms of embedding this, so that was going to be a longevity in terms of project relationship and client relationship on that basis. Excuse me. It was also an opportunity where we were reviewing our processes, and just as we wanted to review that, it was a case of then, we initially started to do that and applying things in either spreadsheet or PowerPoint ways. So just putting and tabulating the information there, and actually this opportunity came along at just the right time for us to be able to do that on this particular system. So it really helped us stick to the program of also reviewing, almost in a lean sort of processor way, just evaluating our processes and making changes. And we had new team members, so it was that were coming in to do this particular role. And so it was a perfect storm in getting all those new elements in place. And actually, if we could underpin that with a really solid system to help us support it, then it was a perfect time.
No, great. Thank you. Just looking at the upvoting, freeze at the top of the pile at the moment. So what ideas do you have with respect to measuring success and I guess ultimate ROI of this project for you?
Yeah, so we've started, great question. So we've started to look at our time management. So we've been evaluating the time that we take on spending time with various sizes of projects. And what we're anticipating that we'll see from using this particular platform is more efficiencies in not only time in terms of keeping us on time of the project, but the amount of actual energy and time that we apply to it. One of the things that we have continued to improve upon, and this system is enabling us to accelerate that improvement, is to make sure that the whole variety of documentation and procedures and processes and guides and booklets and all sorts of things that we have to help support our organisations, which we tailor quite specifically for many organisations, are easily accessible, and that we've got great version control and everything else. And so this system is providing that. So that's where we can see some efficiency in time. The other thing is about quality of service to the client. So given that we have more time, given that we have a higher capability in terms of being able to access content and everything else, then we're anticipating that the quality of service of the client, and one of the points that you just touched on in terms of those measures is where we're seeing that how we can actually measure that and see the success and return on the investment. And then finally for us, it's about internal stakeholder feedback. So one of the things that we'll work with in our organisation is we'll have internal stakeholders who want to know what's going on with various projects, and we spend time at varying levels of quality in terms of providing that update to people. And so with this type of system, what we're going to be able to do is really give our internal key stakeholders that accessibility to be able to see at a very dashboard level approach exactly where we are with all those projects, with very minimal involvement from us at that particular stage. And so they can get it in a more timely manner as and when they need it, rather than waiting for us to do some sort of summary report on a weekly basis. And it also saves us more time in terms of doing it, because we're actually putting all the data in at source rather than recreating the wheel and rewriting things to put in emails or reports. So I guess they're the three key return on investments that we see.
Thanks, Bruce. Actually, it's just triggered my recollection of, I thought there was a really nice exercise that the team did on the kickoff day, which is we went around the team, and I guess how many on your side, Bruce? It was probably 6, 7 from memory on the kickoff day from your side.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, we did a session where there was a number of key capability areas that the team were keen to measure, and essentially that set, everybody kind of gave it a 1 to 10 score. 1 disastrous, 10 we're world class, and we kind of then got to an average assessment of where we are now across that that set. And then the team set a sort of it's slightly subjective, but in some ways this is probably the best way of getting at some of these capability uplifts is, at the end of this engagement, if we rescored everybody and went and did that exercise again, where could we move that average from? And I think roughly from memory, it was looking to move it by at least sort of +2, wasn't it, on the
yes,
on the,
that's right.
the current situation. So I thought that was a really nice way of framing it, and of course that can be revisited at the end of the of the change project to see if we were successful. I'm going to take you next, Bruce, to 5 actually, which is any perspectives on how you arrived at the the key project group. What was the thinking there for MGI?
Yeah, so in terms of the key project members, what we wanted to do is make sure that we had some real gravitas in terms of sort of who would be leading the project and be the key stakeholder. So Shona Scott, who's our managing director, she effectively sponsored the whole project, so she's been heavily involved in the implementation of it. And I think that really does set the tone for the importance of any particular project in any organisation. So you get that senior leadership buy-in. We also brought in people from right across the business that were involved in actually the managing of projects. So the organisation members that really are getting into the nitty-gritty of implementing this and know how this is going to improve their lot, if you like, and also what things they want to see. Because if they then get absolute buy-in and engage and collaborate with it, then they're going to be using that on a very regular basis, constant basis. So we wanted to make sure that we've got our project managers involved. We've got our product design team involved, because they're going to interact with the product, with the grids all the time, and also some of the senior leadership. So that was our sort of cohort of the project, and it just it's working well. People are coming to the party with some fresh ideas and ways not only that we can apply method grid, but also just in our processes. So as I said before, it's quite cathartic in terms of just having a bit of a cleansing of our process and validating and challenging why is it we do it this way. Is there another way to do it?
No, great. And Bruce, I'm just looking at sort of prioritization of these questions, and then some you've touched on a little in the main session. So I'm going to set yourself the challenge of, we've got about 5 minutes left to see if we can cover off 8, 9, and 10. 10's a nice closeout, but yeah, maybe let's see if we can do 8, 9, and 10 in 5 minutes. So yeah, 8, starting with 8 really. If you could give your thoughts on how much resource time it's taken thus far, and any thoughts with for others in that regard. Yeah,
so resource time, our approach has been very much so, certainly as part of the PMs, we did attempt to do a little bit of divide and conquer, and actually we felt that didn't quite work for us, and so we really wanted to invest the time to say, okay, right, let's 4 of the project managers all involved in this, and actually start to really work through the process, because actually that then gives that buy-in, complete buy-in from the start. And so when we start to use it for real, they feel a party of that. So we were conscious that takes resource, that takes time, but we thought it was an investment worth having, rather than being told at the end of the process, this is now the system and tool you're going to use, let's learn it and then go away and do it. So they had a real vested interest in it. So we did have some additional resource that we applied to it and needed to, for the right reasons. And time, we've taken a couple of months now to go through this particular process. Our plan has always been to get things ready for the end of November, and then from the period of the 1st of December through to the end of February, that's going to be our beta phase. So we're testing out our method grid processes and the application of that particular tool with a couple of live clients, just to validate, is this fit for purpose? Is this what we want to do in terms of those particular steps? What do we need to tweak that we can then make change to the master program? And also our program, our projects can be quite different with the programs we offer. So what we're doing is taking that particular project and then actually cloning it and then changing it to adapt it. So we might have 2 or 3 different master grids to accompany different sizes and complexities of project. So for us, we are very busy organisations. I'm sure many people on this call are, and it's about using that time in the most efficient and the wisest way to get the maximum benefit at the end of it. And we feel that whilst we have taken more time than maybe we were intending to, we felt that actually gave us a nice balance between the activity on this as well as our business as usual activity, and feel very comfortable that we're hitting the targets that we laid out for the end of November and also through to the end of February.
Great, thanks, Bruce. I think just to reinforce that point you made earlier, actually, which was what's especially valuable is the time input from, in this instance, Shona, the MD of the business, and yourself, Bruce, as a senior director, that actually not only is that valuable time from an IP development perspective, but from a sort of messaging to the wider firm as set a really, really important marker in the sand there as well. So I think that's been a real success feature of this particular implementation. So moving you to 9, any sort of and I guess I know this is still work in progress, as it were. We're still sort of discussing these aspects with you, but any initial thoughts about how you're tweaking any BAU behaviours or practices to completely embody the method grid implementation?
Yeah, well, certainly. One of the key things, and I think I've alluded to it a couple of times, is as we've been going through this process, we have changed our practices. We have changed our process, and what we had written down on a PowerPoint or a series of slides and spreadsheets, we've changed that, because the way we've gone through, we've challenged as we've been going through and applying it to the method grid setup, that we've been challenging it. So it's been using that time not only for us to just reiterate what we have been doing, it's also taken the opportunity as a group to decide, well, let's challenge that. Is that the right way around it? Does that give us the best solution for our customer? Is it the most efficient way of doing that? And those sorts of things. So I think that's been the biggest change for us that we've evidenced so far, and I'm sure there will be others as we go through in the future.
No, great. I think in summary, real tightening up of your services as as we've had this sort of clarifying conversation. And I think some of the wider aspects, the kind of HR links, the QMS links, I suspect down the line as well, you'll make some sort of tweaks there in the coming weeks and months as well.
Yeah,
so I think
as soon as we start to do the beta phases and go to live, then it will already be part of people's KPIs to ensure that they're using this particular platform. That's evidence. So yeah.
Great. So I think we've got a final minute. Just Bruce, before we thank you for your time, any sort of final thoughts or ideas that you maybe you haven't touched on? Any final tips for others?
Yeah, I think definitely I know there is an option for you to purchase the method grid and not necessarily have the support infrastructure in terms of the onboarding. And I guess I would have been somebody maybe in the past would have said, look, we'll just take it and we'll make it work. Because it's, I think, it's nice to have that plug and play and then actually to find out for yourself. But it's been very, very constructive in terms of driving us to the conclusions and to the areas we're at the moment, and also to to really fill in some of those real efficiencies and benefits that the system can provide by working with Dom and the team. So that's been that would be something I would call out to say, yeah, if you get the opportunity of just investing that a little extra to get that support infrastructure in place to set you up, then it's time and money well spent in terms of the outcomes of where you're looking to be.
No, great. Thank you, Bruce. And just to sort of close off, and just again, thank you very much for taking the time. I know, with the privilege of working with you, I know quite how busy you are, but I think, for prospect clients, just trying to get a better understanding of what this journey looks like and, what it entails, and some fantastic sort of thoughts and sort of top tips there. What a hugely valuable session. So yeah, thank you very, very much, Bruce, and I look forward to speaking with you soon to finish off this journey with you.
Great. Thank you, Dom. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Jody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.